it was one thing for Don to be managing Ozzy and Black Sabbath. It was another thing altogether for the lead singer to be with his daughter.
Tana Douglas has toured with AC/DC, Deep Purple, ELO, Elton John, Ice Cube, Ice-T, Iggy Pop, INXS, Iron Maiden, Lenny Kravitz, Neil Diamond, Ozzy Osbourne, Patti Smith, Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Santana, Status Quo, Suzi Quatro, The Offspring, The Police, The Runaways, and The Who. Her book, Loud, was released by Harper Collins in February. Tana is known throughout the industry as the very first female roadie. Danny Zelisko is my second guest. He's the author of the book, All Excess. I don't know why it's so hard for me to say that. All Excess. Occupation, concert promoter. A concert promoter, he's organized or promoted more than 34,000 shows.
No. It's about 12,000. 34 is a little crazy. I don't know where that came from. Did that come from one of my hype sheets?
Uh-huh.
Well, somebody's an idiot. Nobody can do 34,000 shows. Do the math.
Yeah. Well, I'm not very good at math. That's why it's never a rigor. Never a rigor.
No, I've heard that from somebody else before. I said, what? Usually most people would go, 34,000, not bad, huh? But I can't cop to that one. Somebody might catch me.
Deal. Do you want to start with Sharon's stuff again, or should we move on to something else, Tana?
Well, Sharon's had an interesting life. She was the daughter of one of the most fierce promoters in the world. Her dad was Don Arden was a legendary maniac, and I'm part of that. Definitely rubbed off on Sharon. I love her and everything, but she can be a maniac too, just like all of us are capable of. But they didn't talk for the longest time, because when Ozzy quit Black Sabbath and Don was managing Black Sabbath, Sharon was his secretary at the office, and then Ozzy took off with Sharon, and it was one thing for Don to be managing Ozzy and Black Sabbath. It was another thing altogether for the lead singer to be with his daughter. That did not go over well at all, and they didn't talk for years and years. And then they ended up making up many years later after the kids were born. And I remember seeing him when they did redid the Vows on New Year's Eve one year in California, and it was filmed for their TV show. And I went to that, and it was funny, but it was great to see them, reunited. I'm sure that was very hard on both of them, their whole lives, being apart. I mean, who wants to lose their kid or their dad?
Yeah.
So, I was on that first tour with Ozzy and Sharon. So,
well, when you must have come to Phoenix when they canceled on the day of the show.
No, I did. I was based in the UK.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because on that tour, they came to Phoenix, and we had 6,500 tickets sold, which at the time was a lot of tickets. It was his first tour as a solo act, and we were going to do 10,000 people that night. Tickets were $6.50 in advance, $9 day of the show, $2.50 more for the punters that wouldn't buy in advance, right? And they deserved to pay, but that's what they did back then. So Ozzy and Sharon show up for a sound check, and the building says, "Sorry, we got to close the building. There's a crack in the ceiling." A hairline crack in the ceiling. And we had to cancel the show right there. And you wouldn't have believed Ozzy and Sharon in the director of the State Fair's office. And, what you mean we come play? Hello. And
that's pretty good.
Hello. Anyway, Ozzy's one of my favorite pieces of work.
Yeah. I'm sure the crew were relieved, because if there's a crack in the roof, guess whose fault it's going to be when it all comes down? It's going to be the crew's fault.
it turned out to just be a building flaw, and anyway.
Yeah. All right. So, have you ever heard of AC/DC, Danny?
Of course. They're one of my favorites because my story in a nutshell is that I was an independent promoter until 2000 when I sold in 2001 to what was SFX. And then they parlayed all the promoters into Clear Channel. And then Clear Channel realized they made a stupid deal and lost millions and billions of dollars. And that's how Live Nation came about.
Mm-hmm.
And why was I telling you that again? I got
AC/DC.
blinded by
Something with AC/DC.
So AC/DC was one of the great bands who, after I left Live Nation and went back on my own, they were one of the bands that continued to work with me. And you know, of the major superstar variety like Alice Cooper and like Eric Clapton and Grateful Dead and others, it's very difficult to survive these days around that big of a group, because so many of these groups will take a 40 or 50 city tour offer all at once rather than work with whoever they've been working with their whole careers. And it's a shame, but you know, there's plenty of people that I do still get to work with, and I love them for it. So, but AC/DC is, you know, they never took the bait of just working for one entity.
They're incredibly loyal across the board. You know, whether it's a crew person, a promoter, management, not so much.
Yeah,
but because they need the control, you know, that's their control freaks. But they're loyal. You know, you do the right thing by them, and they will stand by you. You know, no doubt. So you obviously did the right thing.
So AC/DC is your first tour, though. That was your first.
Yeah, I worked for one other band in Australia beforehand for a few months, and then I jumped straight onto AC/DC, and I was with them until they left. Well, actually, I left to go to England just before they did. So.
And you were 17, am I right?
Yeah, I was 16 when I started, 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
How old were you when you promoted your first show, Danny?
19.
Yeah.
And I'd been involved in, you know, knickers and little things for a few years prior to that. But yeah, my first show was 1974. I turned 20 later in the year.
That's cool.
No one actually asked your age back then. You know what I mean? If you were confident and you got on with it and you proved you could do it, nobody even bothered to go, how old are you? You know, I mean, if anyone had asked me, I would have been shut down. You know, I didn't tell and nobody asked. So
well, you know what they asked was, who have you been with?
Yeah, what have you done, or what do you want?
And then when I said nobody, or, you know, not really anything, they go, well, come back after you get some experience. Well, how am I supposed to get the experience if you won't give it to me? And that was the typical question back then. And finally, you know, when I got some money together and I was able to do a few shows, it opened all the doors, because even with just a show or two or three, you now had some legs, you had some history, and nobody was yelling about how you didn't pay them or you did a bad job. And that's what you need, is some credibility in any business, much less this one, for sure.
How did you meet the guys in AC/DC, Tana?
One of their managers at the time, he'd been watching me working with this other band, and you know, they were moving from Sydney down to Melbourne in Australia, and neither Malcolm or Angus had actually lived away from home. You know, I mean, Angus was 18 and Mel was 20, but they'd all just stayed at home. You know, so. I think they wanted sort of a bit of a home environment, and I think they thought if they had a female in the house, because we all lived together as well. So we all lived together for over a year in the house, and then we all lived in a hotel. But
are you taller? Are you taller than them?
Everybody is.
Yeah, everybody is, but it was really embarrassing actually, because, like, you know, fans would come around and want to do everyone's laundry for them and stuff, and we'd all throw in our laundry, and the laundry would come back and they'd be hold up, whose jeans are these? And it's like, boy, because all the other ones were like this big, and mine were like longer and a little bit wider, just a little bit at the time, but wider. And it was like, oh no. So they always joke that I was the tallest one in the band.
Yeah, that's great. So living with them for a year is a long time. I mean,
yeah,
you get to know people good. It's worse than a bus.
Yeah, you definitely get to know people that way.
Yeah. All right, your turn, Danny. I'd love to know how you met Bill Graham. That's very cool.
Prior to prior to putting on any shows, it was in 72 after I got out of high school. I was 17 and I moved to Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I really thought I was going to move there forever, but it turned out that I was only there for a couple of months because I completely ran out of money, could not get a job, couldn't get Bill to hire me. But I met him at a Yes and Edgar Winter show. And Johnny Winter had just gotten out of rehab. Edgar Winter just put out Frankenstein, and Yes had just put out Fragile. I don't know if maybe Close to the Edge had just come out. It was right around there. And they were one of my favorite groups. And the night before their concert, a guy told me I should, from the Allman Brothers, he told me I should just walk onto the equipment truck and start unloading gear like I belong there, which of course, all roadies love a guy like that. But I managed to escape the criticism because I talked to the American guys with an English accent and I talked to the other guys in reverse normally. So they all thought I was with the other group. So one thought I was with Yes, the other thought I was Bill Graham's people.
No wonder he went into music. He's a shyster.
And well, fortunately okay, well, I get it. I didn't, you have to, a shyster is a bad person. A bullshitter is another.
Oh, okay.
And I was a bullshitter.
All right.
And look, nobody was inviting me to do anything because I didn't know what to do. Right.
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to belong. That's the whole feeling that you have when you're at that early age, again, with anything, much less the music business. And, you know, and you know what? The guy's advice was spot on. I didn't get in anybody's way. I helped out for free. And I got fed 3 meals that day, which is the first time in weeks I had 3 meals.
Yeah.
And I go, wow, you get fed doing this. All right. And just being around that energy, the whole San Francisco thing. And then Bill shows up at dinner time and busted me because he didn't know who I was. And I ended up tagging along with him the rest of the night throughout the show and had a great time. And I mean, I was hooked. That was all it took. And I never stopped.
He's an amazing character, you know, like you say, he turned up and busted you, whereas you've been there all day and no one had said anything. And that's how he ran his ship, you know. I mean, he had an eye on everything, you know, and like a lot of his team were, you know, soldiers that he'd served in Vietnam with. You know, he'd given them jobs, you know, when they'd all come back. Like his helicopter pilot, you know, unfortunately, Steve Kahn, who was driving the helicopter, had been his pilot in Vietnam. So I mean, he trusted Steve, and they were, you know, best of mates, and it was such a tragic accident for that to happen, you know. And
Killer and you know, his nickname was Killer.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to say that. Yeah, nice one, Daddy. Thanks. But you know, I mean, I did Santana was how I first met Bill. You know, so I did Santana a couple of tours, and it was just a pleasure to meet him and to see both sides of him. A lot of people talk about, you know, how gruff he was and like, you know, he was like really hard and you know, but there was this other side that was just a crack up, you know. I mean, he was such a good guy. I mean, I have a great memory in London. You know, they were doing, it was the end of the tour and they were finishing it and it was Christmas and it was the end of the tour and it was Hammersmith Odeon. And Bill had decided that they were going to get in a big cargo net. They were going to fly it in out of the roof for the encore, and everyone was going to dress up in different animal costumes. And they were going to grab Carlos, throw him in the cargo net, and fly him up into the roof. So we're all rehearsing that in the afternoon without Carlos there, obviously, because it was meant to be a surprise. But we had to throw someone in the net and make sure we could get the clearance with the lamps and all that sort of stuff. So it was hilarious. He's got his gorilla suit on, and he's got the head. And all of a sudden, and he's on stage and he's sort of like directing as he did, you know, and all of a sudden something happened that pissed him off. And he pulls off the gorilla head and he sticks it under his arm and he starts wailing into this guy. And the gorilla's, the expression though, because it was being squeezed under his arm, was like really goofy and hilarious. And I'm just like dying laughing. I'm trying not to laugh. I'm really trying not to laugh because I don't want him to yell at me. But I just couldn't at the end. And I got tears coming down and he's like, what are you doing? I go, you've got to see this. And, I mean, somewhere out there is a photo. God, I wish I still had it, but somebody has a photo of
Danny has it. Danny's got
it. Was hilarious. It was hilarious.
He's got two versions.
But he was an amazing promoter, and promoters are important people, in the industry. If you have a good promoter, it's Danny. It's just amazing. Different ones. Like one just passed in Australia, Michael Kadinsky. I don't know if you ever met Michael, Danny.
I know Michael.
But yeah, and I'd known Michael since I was 16. It was his office where I got offered the job for AC/DC. But you have huge impacts on both bands and crew members. And if you have a good promoter, it means the world. It really does. Because a good promoter goes beyond just putting on a show.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
What's the worst story you can think of where the show still went on? Worse than a small crack in the ceiling, I would say. But
well, that wasn't a show that happened, so I can't even.
Yeah, that one doesn't count. It's true.
I'll tell you a funny one because you brought up Tana. You brought up Santana. We were doing a show in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, actually. It's called the Santa Fe Downs. It's an old racetrack, horse racetrack, or dogs. I think horses. And we had about 8,000 people coming to the show, and it was on a Saturday, and it was raining all morning. All morning it was raining. It was an afternoon show. Supposed to start at, I think, 2:00. I can't remember exactly, but it was an afternoon show. And we were standing in the grandstand area, which was inside, and you could see the field behind the glass. And Carlos and a couple of his people were there. And Carlos got so frustrated and upset. And usually he's a very, very chill guy. You don't, but he's emotional, and he's Latin, and he's a little crazy too, but generally very composed. But he took this opportunity to lose it on me because it was raining. And I'm kind of looking at him bewildered, like, there's a lot of stuff I can control, but this is above my pay grade, Carlos, okay? You're the mystical one. You tell him to knock it off. And I swear to you, the rain stopped right there on the mark. And he goes, I didn't even have to say anything. All you had to do was say that. And it stopped. And we're going to everybody, radios are going, get this stuff on the stage. Let's let everybody in. Come on, let's go. In 1 minute time, I went from losing 100 grand to making 30.
Wow.
And that's just one of those incredible things. But one of our sayings is it never rains on our parade. And although it has a couple of times, I've only lost out of all those shows a couple of shows. Another one, which was also in Santa Fe years ago, I was doing UB40, sold out. They were as hot as could be, and the show had to get canceled because it rained so hard in this 3,000 capacity venue we had, outdoor place that the artist Paolo Soleri put up. So we had chosen, because it was in August, with the insurance company, we chose to insure the date against rain. So we insured it for all of the whole show gross plus our profit. Wow. And then we didn't have to pay any of the costs. I mean, we had to pay all the costs, but not all of them because the show never happened. But the band got paid 100%. I got paid, all the stagehands and radio, everybody got paid. We rebooked them again. I think it was maybe a year, possibly 2 years later. I swear to God, the same thing happened. Twice in a row. And they told me.
Were you insured the second time? Did you do it?
Of course. Yeah. And it was I think maybe once or twice, buying insurance in a concert is kind of like insuring your hand at a blackjack table. You just don't do it. Unless it's so big and it's going to sell out and the band's willing to accept the premium as a cost to the show, then you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done it a number of times, but those, and then there was a time, same place. I had the Kinks and Jethro Tull, not at the same time, both get washed out, but they reschedule the shows, so the insurance doesn't kick in for that. After being here for almost 50 years, I'm really happy to say that I am still here after all this time.
Yeah.
It's because I was right more times than I was wrong. As simple as that.
So will you gamble in Vegas or no way?
When I used to, basically, we opened Vegas for rock in the 80s. Nobody was doing rock on a regular basis. And we started at the Aladdin Hotel. And yes, I was like a kid in a candy shop, man. Those blackjack tables spoke to me.
Oh God. Oh boy.
my partner Arnie and I mean, we would stop at the tables before we checked in. We'd have our bags with us and then we go upstairs, get rid of it, and find something to keep us awake and stay up all night.
Yeah, it could be dangerous. I'm not going to say who. I'm not going to say who or which tour, but I've seen, doing a residency in Vegas. I've walked past the blackjack table at like 4 a.m, and the tour manager's still there, and he's got the tape briefcase under his foot,
Ooh.
and it's like, oh Jesus, oh God, no. And sure enough, he lost a lot. That night.
I was out with Mark Hogue, who I'm assuming you know too, Danny. And Mark was good. Here you go, Rifkin, and he give me the 10 or 20 bucks that they give you to go gamble with. Here you go, go have fun. And that was great because it was like the most I probably ever spent gambling. I don't like to gamble, but it's okay when they give you the 20 bucks thing. Thanks, Mark.
I barely go near tables anymore, but I would say up until about 2015, I was a regular.
Do you have an answer to that one before the worst story where the show still went on, Tana?
Worst show. Well, I mean, there's been a lot. There's been a lot because it's our job to make sure it goes on. You know what I mean? Yeah. We have people like promoters breathing down our necks and band members and all sorts of things, management. So it's our job to make sure it does go on. But I mean, a typical example is going back a ways. Rick Wakeman, for example, he was doing his Journey to the Center of the Earth. So this is ages ago. But this was probably one of the first bad things that happened. That's why I remember it more than the more recent ones. But he just come from Japan. And what happened is it was at an outdoor venue and an amphitheater. And it's the Sydney Myer Music Bowl in Melbourne. And the load-in's like this. It's like, a 1 in 9 or whatever. And it's basically you open the back of the truck doors and you jump out of the way because otherwise you get killed by something falling on you. It's how it is every time. But what had happened is the gear got held up in customs coming in from Japan. And this was when he had all the inflatables and everything. And he had a 100-piece orchestra and all this sort of stuff with it. And the audience is in and the trucks still aren't here. And it's like, and they're just like, as soon as it arrives, you've got to set it up. You've got to get it up. We have to do this show tonight. We can't reschedule anything. It's got to happen. And
rough.
So it was, that was like a lot of hysteria, getting these inflatable things into the orchestra pit, because the orchestra was actually on the stage behind him. So they weren't in the pit, they were on the stage. So the orchestra pit was used for the inflatables. We'd never seen anything. And we're going through, we're pulling all this stuff together, and his crew's freaking out. We're trying to keep everyone calm and together, and it's just going so fast. We pulled in like any crew we could find in the city at the time. They all came down and helped out. It was just such a wonderful thing. And of course I've gone like, listen, we've got everything sort of in position. They're focusing, they're doing all this stuff, they're checking, and it's like the orchestra, and everyone's just like, no one wants to deal with it. And it's like 100 of the little sconce stands and the little lights, and and it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, I'll do it. All right. So they get this like, there's like 8 big trunks, and so I open them all up, and they're gone. It's all right. Each stand is marked, and they gave me this huge, floor plan thing. They're gone. Each one's marked. It's like, well, how difficult can this be? So I open them all up, and I run along, and I start pulling them out, and they're marked all right, but they're marked in Japanese. Because that's how the Japanese are. They are so thorough. They go through and they recode everything and they redo everything, but they just hadn't occurred to anybody to consider the fact that they don't put it back though. They do it so that they know what they're doing, but they don't put it all back at the end of the loadouts. So I spent the first 3 songs climbing between inflatable dinosaurs and orchestra members' knees trying to like string up the last of the lights and the last of the little sconce steps. So it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny stuff. But that's the sort of thing that happens so more often than not. I mean, that show was actually recorded, like video recorded, and it still sells to this day. And not one person who's ever bought that has commented that
it was the last minute.
It was set up in like 2 hours, and there were crew members crawling through different parts of it, like trying to put things together. You know?
Maybe they
everyone just says how wonderful it was.
Maybe they thought it was part of the script.
But yeah, everyone just says how amazing it was with all the inflatables and stuff.
I've got a great quick Japanese story for you. Laurie Anderson and I were doing a show together, and at halftime she was backstage. She's very mellow and reserved and confident and wonderful. And she says, I'll tell you, I don't know what brought it up. And she goes, I just came back from Japan and I thought that I would learn how to do my show in Japanese just to please them. So she's very intelligent. So she got somebody on the phone from Japan or somebody to tutor her. And she learned how to do all of her speaking parts in Japanese, which is no simple thing. So during the intermission, the promoter comes up to her and says, Honorable Miss Anderson, you do Japanese show for us. Thank you very much. However, whoever taught you to speak Japanese, talk with a stutter.
Oh, no. Yeah. The last thing you want to hear from a Japanese person is, however.
Hey, Joe, one other thing.
Yeah.
You want to hear about a ridiculous show, and this is a quickie. We were doing Lil Wayne. This is 9 years ago, and he's playing an arena in Phoenix. And there was one of those conventions in Los Angeles the same night that we were obligated to be at. So we weren't at the show. So our production manager is at the show, and we're talking to him. It's 6 o'clock. The band hasn't shown up. No, nothing. The equipment is all there, but no band. 7 o'clock, 7:30. 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30, they get a phone call. They get a phone call at the 9:30. They haven't shown up, and there's 10,000 people waiting, and they're pissed. And I finally get a call from Nigel, my production manager, and he goes, "You'll never guess what just happened." I said, "What?" He goes, "They went to the outdoor amphitheater and said, 'Did everybody go home?'" It was in January. The show was not at the outdoor amp. They went to the wrong venue.
Wow.
So they were already late, but then they're on the west side of town. It was maybe 20 minutes away from where the arena was, and the show started late. But what a nightmare that was.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Come on, can't you guys read?
All right, let's pick on some people here. So I know Sam Cole since I was a little guy, since I was 7, 8 years old, I think is when I first.
I just had lunch with Sam.
Yeah, I saw on your Facebook. That's why I bring it up. So, Danny, do you know Sam?
I don't know Sam.
Neil Diamond forever and ever and ever and ever. So, all right.
There was a guy called Sal Bonafetti that did all the Neil Diamond shows, and he paid a whopping $4,000 promoter fee to let you be involved in your own hometown show. So I wasn't a big fan, but I love Neil Diamond. I think he's fabulous. But I wasn't a fan of that deal because I did everything I normally had to do just to be involved. And anyway, that's what happened there.
What about Bob Dates or Bobby Snyder? Any good stories with those guys?
I know both of them, but I mean, those guys were around when I was really finding my legs in the late 70s and in the 80s. I love Bobby Schneider. We don't, and Dates too. I haven't seen or talked to either of them in years.
Okay.
Great guys, great road warriors.
They were fun. I have them on here. I'm going to release it soon. It was a shit show.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Bobby Schneider's out.
We're old and we don't care. We'll tell you whatever you want. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, guys, tail it back. He's like, I don't care. I'm like, I know you established. It was a fun one. All right. So I'm trying to word this smart. So I found touring to be lonely. I got real lonely. And I think that's probably the main reason why I stopped touring. As you were touring here for a long time, Tana, did you ever take like a motherly role or found that you were in a motherly role position with any of the crew or the band when you're like, why me? Because you were basically the only female or one of the fewest things went on?
There were several roles that you take on, and yeah, and funnily enough, I was always the youngest. Like for the first 10 years or so, I was always the youngest person out there. So it was kind of weird taking on some of these roles because these people were so much older than me, and it's like, how
Yeah.
can I offer advice on this stuff? But you're all friends, and so it doesn't really matter if the advice is good or bad. You know, you're holding up a bar somewhere and you're supporting your friend. You know, it's
Sure.
so that in itself is enough most times. You know, but yeah, I mean, I've been in everything from, you know, a shoulder to cry on to, life partnership advice, and none of these things I'm qualified or good at, mind you. But and I do go in with a full disclosure. Excuse me, you're asking the wrong person. but it was just because I was like the only female out there, So they would, some people would just say, "Look, we've got a night off. Can I hang with you for the night? Because if I go out with the guys, I'm going to get in trouble, and then my old lady's going to kill me."
Were you ever a big drinker or anything? Were you a partier back in the day, or
oh
now?
hell yeah.
Now, but-
yeah, I would drink and do anyone under the table, no matter what it was.
Well, because you're Ozzy.
Well, it was part of it as well. It started off right at the beginning. Like if you can, well, I don't know if we can have a girl on the crew. Do you think she can drink, or do you think whatever? So it was like,
Prove your worth.
Well, hang you, don't lay the gauntlet down. I'm going to pick it up. You know what I mean? And then you're so used to doing it that you just keep on doing it. And Danny can attest to this. In the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, everything was everywhere, and it was all free. You know what I mean? So if you were mad if you didn't do it, you know what I mean?
I'm afraid I was the one paying for it.
Yeah, well, thanks, Danny.
Yeah.
And it's true.
It was late to the game, but thanks, Danny.
Yeah, but
Appreciate
promoters would do that. Yeah, that was actually part of it. Record labels did it. All sorts of people did it.
I wanted to make rolling papers, and I wanted to sell them at concerts, and I had Tom Petty interested for 5 minutes, but it would have been great to have Danny Zelisko rolling papers. Thanks, Danny. That would have been better.
Yeah, you find yourself, because you get very close out there. I mean, you're living in each other's pockets. So
yeah,
and whether it's a bus or a plane or wherever the hell you are. I mean, there's just, at the end of the day, it's just us. You know what I mean? It's like everyone else changes. The local crews change, the countries change, the promoters change, everything changes, and you look around and it's still just us.
Yeah.
And it depends how closely the band interacts with you. Some are really close, others aren't, and even if the band is, it's still just us, and we're the ones that have to rely on each other constantly, whether it's a good day, a bad day, whether you're hungover, whether you've messed up, no matter what you've done, you've got to be able to say to this person, get out of it, get here, do this now. We're all in this together. You know what I mean? So, you find yourself in all sorts of situations with other crew members and doing things that it's just a really bad idea.
The question I try to ask everybody, I was trying to put this podcast together, and I was at my mate's house, my buddies, and they have his daughter's in 5th grade. She's a little girl. And she said, you need to ask everybody when they first felt famous. Well, the question really, bear in mind, we're talking about little girl. So we'll make it a bit broader, which would be, when did you first feel good about yourself? When you felt like look at me, look at where I'm at right now. Maybe you did feel famous. Maybe you felt like a celebrity. Any way you want to word it, but where you felt like I'm on my path here. There's something to be said about this moment. What would you guys choose?
Well, I'll go first if you like.
Ladies first, indeed. We're roadies, but we're classy.
I think when I was with the Who at Wembley Stadium, it was Keith Moon had just died. It was their first main show after Keith, and it was a trial for them. Are they going to be accepted? Is it going to work? Are they going to be able to continue? And for me, I just finished working with an English band called Status Quo. I've been with them pretty much the whole time I've been in England after I left Australia. And so for me, it was like a coming out, a separation from that and moving to the next level. I mean, that was sold out everywhere. They're one of these bands that, You know, a lot of people, they never made it in the States, but everywhere else in the world, they sell out everywhere. It's like, you know, one of those weird phenomenons. You have these bands from time to time. But, you know, it was a good time for me to leave them. And The Who was just thinking of restarting up. So I jumped onto that. And, you know, I was standing there and it's like 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm looking out over the, you know, the open field that's going to be full of, you know, at the time, you know, you couldn't get much bigger than 80,000 people, you know, at a venue, you know. And, you know, I'm just sort of standing there going, you know what, this is cool, you know, because normally you don't stop and look, you just do start loading in and it's, you know, it's the old joke, you don't know what town you're in, you just, you know, the stage is where you live your life and that sort of thing, you know. But
Yeah.
I actually did take a minute that morning and I did actually think about it. It was like, you know what, this is cool. I think I've finally, you know, gotten to somewhere where I'm actually ensconced in this and I don't have to think, oh my God, is it going to end? You know what I mean? So that was an eye.
I bet it was raining too, wasn't it, huh, Danny?
No, it was.
Wasn't it? Wow, a sunny day in England. Whoa.
It was foggy. It was London fog. It was kind of eerie, actually. It was nice.
What do you got, Danny?
You know, there's so many moments like that. Because you know, when you're responsible for something like this,
Mhm.
it takes a long. I mean, there's obviously really great, big, special moments like that, which are definitely the ones that tell you, yeah, you've arrived, you're here. But I mean, way earlier back, I mean, at that show with Yes and Edgar Winter, for example, going with Bill Graham to the alley behind the theater to meet Johnny Winter in a station wagon that somebody was driving, and Bill going, do Johnny a favor and grab his guitar. And I open up the back hutch of the station wagon, and there's his Flying V, not in a case. He's just sitting there.
Oh, wow.
And I pick up Johnny Winter's Flying V and I walk in. And remember how big Johnny Winter was in the late 60s and the 70s. And walking across the back of the stage, you know, not in front of the audience, but walking back there, following Bill and Johnny with this guitar, and I'm with them, and it's obviously his guitar. That was one of the first moments where I'm going, well, it was before I even belonged, but this is like going, I could do this. I could hang out with these guys. Yeah. I like them, you know, and there's been so many moments since then. Another, you know, great moment, just a nothing thing now, but 30 years ago or so, I did a stadium show with Pink Floyd, and I was on the edge of the stage, and I thought, I wonder if I can hit a golf ball off the stage out of the stadium. So there I am. David Gilmour walks up behind me, and I'm hitting golf balls off his stage right before his sound check. And he goes, I think you got that one, you know, and it was a 3-wood. It was a long way. I ended up having to go to the short side because going over the front, forget it, way too far.
That's a great. I don't want you to miss your plane. That's why I was going quicker.
Yeah, I had one of the greatest guys in my life just passed. Cancer.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's a cancer doctor, and every year he helped save me when I had colon cancer 18 years ago, and that's how I met him, was through Shep Gordon. Shep had him call me to consult me, and then my doctors at Mayo Clinic, which was quite a move on my part and his part to do that, because Mayo doesn't like being lectured by anybody. Then they found out who it was, and they were in awe of me now, and I got some really nice treatment from them. But he, of all the ironic things, this guy's named Steve Prescott. He got a very rare form of cancer, and himself, of all people, to get it. I mean, just so wrong in so many ways. Anyway, they're having a memorial for him in Oklahoma City tomorrow night, and I gotta go get
my
him.
Condolences to you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But he was ready for it, fortunately. So we weren't, but he was. That's the most important thing.
So other than Amazon, where can we find your book, or would you tell us to go to Amazon specifically?
Well, Amazon, if you're in any other part of the world other than the United States, if it's in the United States, go to dzplive.com. We self-published, printed, promoted, everything. If anybody at Harper wants a promoter book, have them call me, Tana. Uh, I,
Brilliant.
I would love, the thing that I've missed so far, and I want to get it, I'm determined to get it, is by not being with a publisher, this book doesn't get service to all the reviewers. And that's what people need in book world, to know that a book is out, other than seeing it on Facebook or social media. It's kind of like having a record out and no stock in the stores. It's really stupid.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've managed to sell quite a few copies of it, but I'd really like, it should be so much bigger and just to reach people. I don't really care about making money from it, and I better not, because I don't think I'm going to. But I had a blast doing it, and it's a beautiful calling card. It's a really nice thing to give people or sell people or whatever. But it was nice, it's fun to get the stories out. I'm going to get yours. I want to read your book. So where's yours? Is yours on Amazon too?
Me or Tana?
Tana.
Oh,
I don't know about yours, but
well, that's
Okay.
the thing. It's published in Australia through Harper Collins. So what they do is it's by territory. So they sell it to other things. So it's at the London Book Fair right now. You can get it on Amazon. You can go online. There are people who have picked it up for the States and picked it up for the UK, because so many people have been asking for it, and it's not in wide release, which is the problem I'm having.
But you were recording an audiobook, which is a big deal.
Yeah, I did the audiobook at the beginning of last month. So, that's out this month. So
You gotta do
it's
the
out,
audiobook, Danny. People don't
it's out
read.
in all, it's out in all formats. You can get it on Amazon. There's abooks.com, and there's also the bookdepository.com. So yeah, you can get it in all different formats.
And for the viewers at home, what's the name of the book called again?
It's called Loud.
Wow.
Thank you, Danny.
I was
See what I
kidding.
did there?
He is a
He's
promoter.
pushing-
Look at him. Look at
He
him.
is. He's pushing me a plug. I love
Got it. This guy. He's on top of it. On top of it.
Yeah, that's what we do.
That's right. That's right. And that's not what I do. I'm behind the
You know what else
scenes.
Hope he's not gonna be late for his plane here. I feel guilty.
No, he's smart.
Nice.
There you go. Absolutely. I've started reading it actually.
Did you?
Danny? Yeah, I've started reading it. So I've got it on Kindle. So I'll finish it up when I get a chance. I've just got a couple of deadlines dealing with.
Let me know what you think.
I shall, yeah. I've got a couple of speaking events coming up. So, I've realized that I do a lot of this sort of stuff, which is interaction, but to actually stand and talk for an hour, it's a whole different thing.
Somehow I don't think you have a problem talking to anybody for now.
I'll just be talking to everybody for an hour and no response. So yeah, so that'll be interesting. So, that's another side of it. That's quite an interesting side of it, actually. I quite enjoy it, is doing the speaking events.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, you guys, I'm sorry to blast. I'd love to sit here and talk all day, but unfortunately, I got to make this thing, or I'm gonna blow it.
My condolences. Genuinely sorry to hear about your son.
Nice to meet you, Danny. And
if
Will Fife said you're a good man. So
well, you know what Willie Fife is, don't you? He's a
well, that's what he said. He said, send that to him.
Also, if you see Chuggy, say hello for me.
I will do. Absolutely.
One of my favorite humans.
Oh, he is, isn't he just?
Yeah, he's darling.
Yeah. Good man. Good man.
All right. Well, look, I
Safe
promised him next year I'd come down for a visit. We'll look you up.
I'm in LA.
Oh, well, forget it then.
Forget it.
He doesn't come to LA. There's no reason.
Unless we're down there at the same time. So I was supposed to be there.
Right on.
All right.
Or else I'll find you in LA then. Good enough.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Look forward to it.
Too.
Bye, Danny.
See you later.
I'm not done with you though, Tana. I have one
nice
question.
to meet you guys.
Okay.
Bye, Danny. Have a safe flight. Safe flight.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
So we can.
And then there was one.
Then there was one. We started with the best and we end with the best. I don't know. We'll knock Danny because he's knock Danny around that guy. But so do you remember the moment you met? I love AC/DC, so I keep going back to it because I really do. But do you remember the moment when you first met the guys in the band? Was everybody together, or how did you have a proper interview with the bandmates, or what happened?
Yeah, like I say, I was at Mushroom House, the promoter I mentioned earlier to Danny, Michael Gadinsky, who just passed. He was like huge. Him and Chuggy actually were partners eventually. But I was at his. What we do is on Mondays we'd go in there to what was called Mushroom House, because there was a booking agency there, there was a management there, and there was like all sorts of things going on in this one building, and it really was the heart of Australian music there at the time, and for many decades. And so we'd go in on Mondays, and that was kind of like our networking day. We'd all pick up our call sheets for the week and see if we had gigs together, or, you know, because we did so many shows in a week, you know, to do 12, 14 shows wasn't unheard of. And all in different venues though, not the same, none of them in the same venue. So you're driving all over the place, you're doing this. So if you had an early show with a band that, you know, you knew that their PA'd work or yours would work, we'd trade off. So we'd spend Mondays sort of figuring all that out to try and make our lives a bit easier. And AC/DC at the time was just moving down to Melbourne, and they just signed with Melbourne management team of Bill Joseph and Michael Browning. And Bill Joseph, I really, really liked Bill. He was like this fatherly kind of guy, a New Zealander. And I just really, really liked and respected him. And he came up to me and he said, so Tana, you know, I was working for this other band called Fox. He's like, have you ever thought of working for a different band? You know, and I'm like, well, I'm working for a band, you know. I mean, I was just 16, you know what I mean? Maybe I was 15 at the time, I don't know. But, and it's like, oh no, I've got a job. I was so amazed that I had a job. It was like, oh, I have a job, you know. And he's like, yeah, but, you know, what if they stop doing shows and break up? You know, he says, I can see a few cracks form in there. They're not doing as many shows as they were. You know, what happens then? You know, and I'm like, put the fear of God into me. It was like, I just thought everything was going to keep going along. You know what I mean? And because I knew nothing, you know what I mean? I just turn up, do the show and set it all up, break it all down, and then wait for the next show. You know, that was my life, you know, at the beginning.
Did you move to England because they did? Is that what brought you there?
No. I moved before them. I left them when they went in to do their second album. But so what happened is Bill came up to me and said this to me, and he says, look, I've got a band moving down from Sydney. He says they're, you know, they're young like you. He says, and we're looking for a road crew, you know, and I think you'd be great for them, you know. And I'm like, oh, and now I'm interested because he's just told me that my band's falling apart and I'm terrified that I'm going to be without a job. And because what he said to me was, he says, you know, he says, it's better if you go from one band to another before it stops. He says, because then what happens is you're unemployed, you don't have a job like everyone else.
Yep.
He says, and being a girl, are they going to give you a job over a guy? And that put the fear of God into me. It was like, oh, Jesus, I don't want to test that just yet. You know, I'm too new here. You know, it's like, because a lot of them had known each other for 10 years or whatever, you know, and it's like, oh. So that perked my ears up. And I went, well, you know, he says, if you want to talk about it, yep, I want to talk about it. So off we went. He introduced me to the other manager, and they said, well, if you're interested, I'll take you around the house to meet the boys, you know. And it was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. So I got in the car. We drove around. They just rented this house, and the band was in town for a couple of days to sign all the management contracts, and they were going back up to Sydney to continue recording their first album. So, you know, they brought me to this house, you know, and it was like, you know, pretty worn down looking thing, you know, it wasn't nothing flash, you know, probably in a little bit worse repair than any other house on the street, you know, and they took me inside, and there they were all standing in the living room, and there was like 5 guys. And I was confused though, because 2 of them were young and 3 of them were older, and it was like, how does that work, you know? And so their brother George, you know, George Young, who was also their producer, you know, for a lot of it in the beginning and back again later on in that time, he took charge like he always did. He says, "No, come here, Tana." You know, he says, "Let me introduce you to everyone." You know, and so he introduced me to Malcolm and Angus, and those were the 2 that were almost my age and that made sense. You know, and then he introduced me to Bon Scott, who was the original singer, who was, I mean, in my infant eyes, was so much older. George Young, Harry Vander, and Bon Scott were the other 3 of the 5 that were in the room. And those 3 in my eyes were so old.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, and I was confused. And then when he said, you know, Bon made a joke about being old, and like he was the old man of the band, and, you know, and it was like, oh, okay. So he's the singer. These are the 2 guitar players. and you two are the producers. Okay, got that. And it's like, where's the rest of the band? Well, we don't have the rest of the band yet. We're getting them. We're working on the album, and we're starting auditioning. So if you want the job, I mean, I was there for maybe 40, well, maybe 30 minutes. Well, actually, it was less than that.
Were you there when they were auditioning the other people?
Oh yeah, both Phil Rudd and Mark Evans. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the audition process like? Was it relaxed, or was it actually very?
They have a 2-part audition process, and the first part you don't even get to plug in; you just talk to them, and that's because they want to know where you're at with music, and they want to know where you think you see yourself in the band. And it was great because it saved us from listening to a lot of bad auditions.
Yeah.
so they just talked to these people, and if they didn't give them like a bunch of songs that they wanted them to go and learn and come back, then that was the end of it. It was like, okay, that one's gone. Okay, here comes another one. So we got Phil to audition for them. That was great, and he got hired straight away. And we got him to audition in a different city actually, but that's a whole other story. And then Mark came in, and he auditioned, and after that, we're all sitting in the living room, and Mark's gone off, and they're all sitting around, we're all talking about it, and they're going, well, what do you think? And everyone's talking, and then Browning, the manager, he turns to me, he says, well, what do you think, Tana? What do you think about this guy? And I'm like, well, it's he plays all right, he seems to know his place. He's not too busy, he doesn't take over, and it's like, I don't know. And it's like, I wonder, do you think he can sing backing vocals? Because I ended up doing that front of house sound, and it used to just make me cringe when I'd hear Malcolm or Angus sing backing vocals. It was like, oh God. It was like, oh, it's so bad. And it's like, I mean, still to this day, right up to the end, Malcolm was still doing it, but it was always like a thing with me. And then they've gone, well, we don't know, but what does he look like? And I'm like, what does he look like? I don't know what he looks like. They go, but you're a girl, you must know. Is he like, do you think girls will like him? And it's like, oh, I don't know, I suppose.
Put them in those little bitty shorts that they wore, the blue shorts.
Oh God, there was some serious wardrobe failures in the early days. I've got to tell you.
I agree.
There was some sad.
Since I'm so stylish myself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and myself, I mean, I was wearing jeans and t-shirts from day one. You know what I mean? But some of Bond's stuff is pink satin jumpsuit, like little overalls.
They're hilarious.
And I know, it was like, oh my God. And Malcolm with his platform boots. It's like, no, all this has to go away.
Was it your fault that Iggy Pop wore no clothes? Because you were like, Iggy, just remove it all.
No, it was not actually. I contributed my black leather jacket to him inadvertently. Didn't mean to. He stole my jacket to wear on stage after I told him no 100 times. And of course, the only night he loses a jacket from the stage was mine.
Oh, it's bummer.
Like, we had a severe falling out over that. Everyone said I overreacted, but I spent 4 years breaking in that leather jacket. You know what I mean? It was just perfect, and I wore it every single day. And I told him no every single day.
That Iggy Pop guy.
Yeah, I love him to death, but it was hard forgiving him for that one. It was hard. It took a long time, and I still think he owes me a jacket.
Definitely owes you a jacket.
I actually say, if you're reading this book, you owe me a fucking leather jacket.
Jacket back. Not a jacket. It was for Janie Lane, the singer of Warrant. He left his jacket at the gig, and so I was a leather jacket actually. So I kept the jacket in the bus and I gave it to him at the next gig. And I remember looking at me like, "Wow, thanks." Just like totally surprised. Like, why would you give it back?
Well, he probably hadn't missed it yet. Had he even missed it?
Maybe, he probably didn't even know.
Yeah,
this is mine. Yeah, you wear it every night. Oh,
he's probably wondering what the hell you're doing with his jacket.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the jacket. Would you move back to Oz or no way?
There's no real reason for me to be in Los Angeles at the moment. You know what I mean? It's changed a lot, and I'm not necessarily 100% still happy being here, and that's my choice. I mean, would I move back to Australia? Possibly. I mean, I was in England just before COVID hit, and I lived there for like 8-10 years, before.
A long time. Where were you living in England?
I was based in London. based in
Okay.
London. Yeah. And, you know, and I have tons of friends over there from all that time still. And, you know, I mean, I loved it. You know, they've discovered central heating and all sorts of things since I lived there. And, you know, so it's much more, so it's just comfortable living there. But it was summer, you know,
I got one. So my mother,
could I
my
handle
mother,
that winter still? Like, you know, I'm not a winter person. So, you know,
yeah, it's cold.
snow's great on a postcard. That's about it.
My mom said when she was a little girl, she grew up in northern London, that they didn't have a loo inside the house. Or no, they
Oh,
did,
yeah.
they did. And she said
Oh,
that she kept it quiet at school because nobody else did. That was like
right.
rich people stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
No.
seriously no central heating. It's like I would jump into my bed, and my first reaction was the sheets are wet. That's how cold it was. The sheets felt as though they were wet because it was so cold, and it was like, my God, you know. And they didn't have showers at the time. You know what I mean? To get a shower, it was just like they had this tiny little thing that trickled a little bit of water down. And that's if you were lucky. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's all these things that you take for granted, you know. I mean, now they have them, you know, so that's nice. That would be something. But, you know, whether I'd retire back to Australia, maybe, you know, somewhere on the beach somewhere.
How often do you talk to Sam Cole?
Well, you know, I mean, Sam and I buddied up in '76. We became really good mates, just mates, just good buddies, you know, and we'd tear around on tour together and get into various states of trouble. And you know, and so then when I got transferred over here, I saw him a bit at the beginning, and then I lost touch because I was traveling so much and touring so much, so I never saw him. And then I went back to Europe, and then I went back to Australia, and then I saw him briefly. Oh God. I mean, when I saw him on Friday, I hadn't seen him for ages. And it was interesting because he just sort of popped up not long before Nook did that article about Neil Diamond. Did you see that on Everything Stage Lighting?
No, what is it?
Oh, it's hilarious. He did an article on the guy who works for Neil Diamond, which is Sam Cole, who always sits on the side of the stage but doesn't really seem to do anything. And how this lighting guy used to flick M&Ms at him during the show to piss him off. And that how he got his revenge, which was Sam. How Sam got his revenge was he super glued him to his follow spot chair. You know, he put super glue on the chair just before Nook had to jump, not Nook, but this other guy, Betts, had to jump into it. And so both his shoes and all his clothing was stuck. And he was stuck there for the whole show. And then after the show, when they got him down, they had to cut him out of his clothes.
Right.
So that's how Sam got his revenge.
So I had there was a girl named Elena. She's Neil's wife's assistant, I think, and she started dating a buddy of mine. And so she says, well, you know, I can get all you guys in the show. I can get and I'm like, you can't get 25 people into the show. This girl's full of shit. So she's like, I'll get him in the show. So I call Sam to see if we can get into the show. And I've been with my girlfriend for 10 years. This is the only show I've been to in 10 years. I'm not a big concert goer anymore. And so Sam doesn't call me back, dickhead. So we go into the show. This girl was right. 25 of us just walk right into the show. And I'm like, I'm floored because we're in LA and it's not that easy. So, okay, I'm wrong, but I'm floored. So my entire purpose here is to get backstage to say, hey, Sam, look who just made it in. So I get backstage and I see Sam and he looks over, he goes, oh shit, who let him come? And it was before I could say anything to him because I was all fired up and he's like, ugh. I'm like, oh, come on. You miss me. You miss me. So, all right. Well, thank you, Tana. And then, yeah, if you ever want to meet up with us, come out and do so. Or we should come meet you. I love Korean barbecue.
There you go.
Oh, I do. I really, really do. I've been meeting up with some friends. There was I was living in Agora. And so, do you know what that is? It's like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And we would go to the all you can eat Korean barbecue. And they laugh because they're like, how could you eat that much? I'm like,
yeah. You know, this is definitely the place to come for Korean food.
Oh, so good. What did Harper Collins do for you? Did you find that they've helped you?
Yeah, I mean, in Australia, absolutely. Are we still recording? Can we stop recording?
No, you can stop. Yeah, or here, I'll just stop it if you want.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching Party Like a Rockstar. If you're not already subscribed to the Facebook or YouTube channels, do it. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The handle is Party of Stars. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.